I want to come back to the book and the purpose of the book. So
This is the last question. We're at time. We gotta go. Sorry.
Yep. Well, that's almost a first, not an absolute first, but to have a member of staff of the former Vice President of the United States actually speak up during the interview to say that we were going too long. I didn't expect that. But coming back to the interview itself, it seems to me at its very heart, there is a reluctance on the part of Kamala Harris to actually spell out and talk about the issues that Joe Biden had as president. Was it Joe Biden's decision, his failure to recognise his own frailties in that position that put you in the position that made it almost impossible to win that race?
He was not frail as president of the United States.
But he had frailties. We all saw the debate. I'm just wondering, is there a reason why you won't go to that prolonged frailty question? Now, we saw the debate, we saw the difficulty he had marshalling his thoughts.
I have answered that question. I do not believe that
I think it's just hard watching the debate to see how there could not be a problem long term with someone who can't marshal their thoughts. I'm not saying his acuity wasn't present.
I talked about that in the book.
It's in the book, but it seems to me she doesn't want to say it on camera.
If you thought you saw disastrous interviews in the past, wait until you see this train wreck. This is one for the ages. What many believe to be one of her most painfully awkward moments yet. Kamala Harris got absolutely torched during an exclusive interview with the Australian journalist Sarah Ferguson, who wasn't about to take Kamala's characteristic word salads for an answer. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, and we're going to see a masterclass of what real reporting should be and precisely why Kamala failed the test. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive right in.
Wasn't Joe Biden then to put it on him? Wasn't his refusal to recognise his own frailties the reason that you faced a nearly impossible task?
I ran against Donald Trump for president, and Donald Trump ran on a platform that was in large part, I believe, misrepresenting his intentions to the American people. I do believe that there are a fair number of people that voted for Donald Trump who believed him when he told them that his first priority on day one is going to be to bring down prices, and he didn't. And you combine that misrepresentation of intention with also what was at play in terms of massive amounts of mis and disinformation.
Now, forgive me.
And a truncated calendar in terms of the clock.
I want to interrupt you because that is a world-class pivot, but it is not the question that I asked you.
Whoa, stop right there. Stop. Where has this reporter been all our lives? That was absolutely brilliant. I want to interrupt you because that, madam, was a world-class pivot. That was not the question I asked you. I mean, that was one of the most rhetorically refined way of saying, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. You are dodging my question. I'm not going to let you do that. And she's absolutely right. Did you notice? This reporter asked Cackles, in effect, was this lying? Was this masquerading? This misrepresentation of Biden as cognitively cogent, was that in part why you lost? Did that make your task nearly impossible? And how did Cackles respond to that? She responded by pivoting to Trump's supposed misrepresentations rather than her own. She was asked about Biden's misrepresentation of himself, and she pivoted to Trump's supposed misrepresentations on the campaign trail. And by the way, just so we're all clear, even Newsweek is admitting prices are far lower today than they ever were under Biden. Gas prices under Trump have fallen under $3 per gallon for the first time in 4 years. Remember, gas hit over $5 per gallon under Biden in 2022. Remember those egg prices, too? Remember the Democrats mocking Trump over the egg shortage that Biden instituted by having hundreds of millions of chickens slaughtered? Yeah, well, egg prices are down 86% today. They're down. Wholesale prices are down across the board. Retail prices inevitably follow. Anyway, back to this interview train wreck.
I want to interrupt you because that is a world-class pivot, but it is not the question that I asked you, which is about Joe Biden's failure to recognize his own frailties and what that did to you. The question is about Joe Biden, are you still reluctant to criticize the former president?
In what regard, please?
Well, just in terms of that question. So you went
What
on.
exactly would you like to ask? Be more specific, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Are any of you confused? Are any of you in the least bit unclear as to the question? This reporter hardly has issues with syntax and enunciation. I think she was rather clear. Did Joe Biden's failure to recognize his own frailties make it harder for you to win? And given your dodge, your pivot, are you still reluctant to speak ill of your former boss if such a question required you to do so? I think she's being very clear. And Kamala's response is confusion. Huh? What do you say? What precisely are you asking me? Now, make no mistake. She knows exactly what she's asking her. She just doesn't know what the hell to say. And she doesn't know what the hell to say because she's not used to being pressed by the press. She's not used to pushback from reporters whose job is supposed to be to get to the facts and report to the people what's really going on with their political leaders. It's the principal means by which the press holds those in power accountable. Our press, our legacy media, unfortunately, has largely given up that constitutional responsibility for something called advocacy journalism, where they're bought and paid for shills for the Democrat Party. But let's see how Cackles does with this reporter being more specific with what she's precisely asking.
Was it Joe Biden's decision, his failure to recognize his own frailties in that position, that put you in the position that made it almost impossible to win that race?
He was not frail as president of the United States.
But he had frailties. We all saw the debate.
I do believe that Joe Biden had the capacity to be president of the United States, and I have never doubted that he had the capacity to be president of the United States. If you want to talk about whether he had the ability to endure what a race for president of the United States would require in that political environment in 2024, as I've said in the book, I had concerns.
I'm just wondering, is there a reason why you won't go to that prolonged frailty question? We saw the debate, we saw the difficulty he had marshalling his thoughts.
I have answered that question. I do not believe
that I think it's just hard watching the debate to see how there could not be a problem long term with someone who can't marshal their thoughts. I'm not saying his acuity wasn't present.
I talked about that in the book. And I also mentioned the context in which that debate occurred. And you'll probably remember how I talked about that in terms of what his travel schedule had been, that what he had been enduring in terms of the timing of that debate. I talk about it extensively in the book. I'm not shying away from that. That's why I wrote it in the book, because I do know it's a question people had.
You know, ever since Trump took office this year, the left has waged an all-out war against the president's economic strategies. Liberal economists claim Trump's tariffs would crash our economy and send us spiraling down into recession. Actually, in April, CNN published an article stating, quote, Trump took the U.S. economy to the brink of a crisis in just 100 days. They claimed the tariffs were reckless, that inflation would skyrocket and unemployment would soar. And now, well, let's just say some of those same economists who were slamming Trump's tariffs are singing a different tune. It's absolutely incredible. Trump is reshaping the entire economy, essentially righting the ship, which is now headed to much more prosperous shores. And what's most exciting is that this shift is creating massive opportunities for patriots like us to finally take control of our financial future. But you've got to act. You can't just rely on big banks and mainstream fund managers to act in your best interest. I believe we are truly standing on the precipice of what will be known as the most prosperous time in our nation's history, America's golden age. The only question is this: will you be an active participant, or will you sit on the sidelines watching everyone else build wealth? Which is why I am so excited that our good friend Mark Wilburn of Neos Capital has agreed to host another one of his live Golden Age Summits for you on Thursday, November 6th and Saturday, November 8th. Mark is a stock market expert and an excellent teacher. All year, I've been hearing stories from our listeners who went from knowing nothing about trading stocks to building real wealth for their families. People like James, who was sick of watching his mutual fund gain just 6%. He went to one of Mark's summits and then sent us this message just a couple of weeks ago, letting us know his account went up 80% in just 6 months after applying what Mark taught. 80% versus 6. That's the type of opportunity we're talking about. That's the new golden age. This live online event will take place Thursday, November 6th and Saturday, November 8th. Mark regularly charges over $200, as you can imagine, for this type of training. But as a personal favor to Turley Talks listeners, he's agreed to these at no charge. So go to goldenagetraining.com. That's goldenagetraining.com right now to secure your spot. We're living in America's golden age, and it's time to take bold moves to build the legacy we want for our families. Go to goldenagetraining.com right now to reserve your spot. Now, what you just saw there was a perfect example of why the political left is doomed to destruction. The left inevitably collapses under the weight of its own competency crisis. And that crisis is rooted in something called bio-Leninism. It's a brilliant term. We've talked about it before, and it's basically the notion that inevitably cultural Marxist coalitions will place at the top of their social hierarchy, their social pyramid, leaders who are the last people on the planet who should be in a leadership position. So it basically works like this. Whereas traditional Leninism promoted adherence through the ranks by virtue of their ideological fidelity to Marxism, bio-Leninism promotes more on the basis of one's identity and the resemblance one has to victim classes. And so bio-Leninism, being a Marxist-inspired identity politics, promotes their faithful through the ranks not because of their competence, but because of their or not even because of their ideological fidelity, but because of their identity politics, the number of identity politics boxes that they can check off. And what inevitably happens is they end up enthroning and enshrining as their leaders those people whose lack of competence and skills renders them most unlikely to assume leadership positions. And so bio-Leninism inevitably suffers from a competency crisis precisely because competency has been replaced by identity as the primary screening procedure for positions of leadership. Because identity trumps competence, bio-Leninist movements inevitably put into leadership the people least competent to lead. Now, does that not perfectly summarize Kamala Harris? I mean, we were talking about this with the CBS firings the other day, right? All the firings and layoffs that are happening right now. You might want to check out that video. It's fascinating. All the firings and layoffs that are happening at CBS because of Barry Weiss coming in. Barry Weiss is editor-in-chief, the brand new editor-in-chief. And she's basically purging CBS of all of its wokeness because it cost CBS executives too much. This is a response to their desperate attempt at covering up Kamala Harris's disastrous answers in their 60 Minutes interview a couple of weeks before the election. They had to pay Trump $16 million for that, and the executives never want that to happen again. So they're purging CBS as we speak of all of those woke influences. And what Barry Weiss has been finding, she's been tasked with purging, what she's been finding as she's examining the staff in the newsroom, she's finding that there's a whole host of people at CBS whose competence level, let's just say, is hardly up to par. And this is because of the woke basis of their promotion. Woke privileged liberals are a business model nightmare. Their sense of entitlement, privilege, prerogative actually makes them very professionally and intellectually lazy. And again, I think we saw that with the Kamala Harris interview with 60 Minutes, as well as with this Australian broadcaster. This is the inexorable consequence of wokeness, of bio-Leninism. It's a debilitating dynamic inherent in privilege and prerogative, where one expects that one will be promoted based solely on their identity rather than on their competence. And I think that's exactly what we just saw on display in this disastrous interview. Here's one more very awkward final moment.
Does it make you angry that former President Biden still says he would have won?
I am focused on the present.
And so are we. And we are so thankful that Donald J. Trump is our president.